what we're going to do today is we are going to look at however and despite. This week so far, we've been covering gerunds, verb patterns, and things like that. So it will really, really help us. Knowing what a gerund is will really help us when it comes to looking at despite. It will really help us because we'll look at the grammar later on, but with despite, we need to use noun phrases afterwards. However is a bit different. So let's go and have a look at however. It should be really, really easy for us to do. So let's go and have a look at this. So we looked at although, we've looked at whereas, we've looked at but. I don't want to go into that too much detail today because we've done it already. I think it was really simple for us yesterday. But let's look at however. Now, I've had a few questions recently about however and how it works. The first thing for us to remember about however is that it connects sentences. Okay, what we normally talk about when we're talking about conjunctions, we normally talk about clauses. So I still smoke is one clause. I have lung cancer is another one. And we connect them inside one sentence with the word although. Now what however does, however, connects two parts of a contrast, but it does it in two separate sentences. So how does it work? Well, it works at the beginning of a sentence. It can work at the end of a sentence, and it can work after a subject in a sentence, so in the middle of a sentence. And what we'll do now is we'll look at some examples. So if I put billionaire, small flat. Okay, let's put Paul, billionaire, small flat. I think we know what a flat is, an apartment. Okay, so really simple way of using however. So if I ask Anuj, are you there, Anuj?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good to see you in the class.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so
I have a holiday today, sir.
right. I see. Is it a public holiday in India?
Yes, sir.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so tell me about Paul. What do you know about Paul?
He's a millionaire.
Okay, Paul is a billionaire. Okay, but
Small flat.
he lives in a small flat. Okay, that's a nice, easy way with but, isn't it? And why is that a contrast, Anuj? Why is it a contrast?
We are connecting two sentences, sir.
Yeah, but we can. But I'm just saying, why is it a contrast? Paul is a billionaire. But why is it a contrast that he lives in a small flat? What do you think? Anybody else? Can anybody else tell me why that's a contrast?
He have a lot of
Normally-
money, but he doesn't want to live in a luxury house.
Yeah. So where would a billionaire normally live? In a mansion.
Yeah.
In a mansion or a penthouse apartment, yeah, or a country house or a castle or a palace, yeah. So that's why it's a contrast. So if I put it into two sentences, now this is just two facts about Paul. One, Paul is a billionaire. Two, Paul lives in a small flat. They're the two things that we know about him. But if I want to show the relationship, Anuj, if I want to show that I think that that's a contrast, I put, however.
He lives in a small flat.
So don't forget this comma. People forget that comma all the time. And a real classic mistake that people make is this: Paul is a billionaire. Oops. People say this all the time. Paul is I'll try and write it, however, like this. But I don't want this in the middle of the sentence. That doesn't work. Now, there are times that we can put however in the middle of the sentence, but this is not one of them. So I want you to put however at the start of a new sentence with a capital H. So if I ask everyone in this class, just be honest. Just be honest with me. Is it possible for you to make that mistake? Like that?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That with the comma before, however.
Oh, but with a comma before. Okay, I understand that because I think in French and Spanish and Italian, people tend to, and I think maybe Romanian as well, commas get used in a way which is a bit more strong than in the UK.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
In English, we use commas to separate clauses, but only in relative clauses normally, or in lists, we do it as well. Normally, we put a full stop in if we're saying something new. Okay. So here, we don't want that comma. We want a full stop. We want a capital H, and we want the comma coming after, however. Now, I think that
How
that makes
about,
sense.
sorry.
Yeah.
How about if we put the semicolon after the period?
Han,
And however.
I don't want any semicolons.
Okay.
I never use semicolons in my writing. I don't need to.
Oh.
And my writing, I'm not saying my writing is Charles Dickens or William Shakespeare, but it's definitely good enough to pass any English language exam. I just think they're confusing. Why use one? For me, just put a full stop and start again. Okay. So
Okay.
let's think about how we can put at the end of a sentence. Yeah. Okay, Laura.
Is it correct to say he is living in a small flat?
Yeah, you can do that. Now, just a very, very quick thing. To live and to work, I think that these two verbs are the cause of a lot of confusion in English for non-native speakers because it makes no difference. Oops, it makes no difference whether they're in continuous form or whether they're in simple form. They mean exactly the same. But with other verbs, it does. So let me give you an example. Paul is living in France. Okay, Paul lives in France. They mean exactly the same thing, really. That's how they get used. Okay, I am working as a chef. I work as a chef. Okay, those mean the same thing. Now, to live and to work, they're probably the most common verbs that you're going to use as a non-native learning a new language. Where you live and what you do as a job, they're two of the most important things. So you learn this at the beginning of learning English, and then you start thinking to yourself, well, I can use any verb in the same way, but it's not true. For instance, I am eating a sandwich. Well, what does that mean?
I
Now,
am
Right now.
Right
Right
now,
now.
here's my sandwich. Yeah. But if I said this, I am eating a sandwich every day. That's not right, is it?
no.
It's what it should be is I eat a sandwich every day. So I think that what happens is people get confused with the verbs because they see work and live. So yeah, it's fine, Laura, in this case to put he is living in a small flat. That's okay. But
Okay.
don't think that you can do it with every verb. One of the, I've got a few places, I call them flash points, grammar flash points. One of the mistakes, the most common mistakes you hear of all different cultures coming into English is the difference between present continuous and present simple. I am going to that restaurant a lot. No, you go to that restaurant a lot.
Okay.
It happens a lot. And we'll look at that more when we go through the tenses. Okay, so I can also do this. Paul is a billionaire. Oops. He lives in a small flat, however. Now, it's not as common. Okay, it's not as common. It's fine. I don't mind that. The only thing I would say is every time you write, you choose what you focus on. Every time you speak, you choose what you focus on. So for instance, I could say the teacher gives the students a lot of information. Well, then I'm focusing on what the teacher does. Or I could say the students are given a lot of information by the teacher. Well, I can switch to the passive, and then I'm focusing on what happens to the students. So I choose that. I can choose active or passive. In this case, I don't realize that it's a contrast until the very end of the sentence. Is that good? Is it bad? Well, I don't know. If you put it here, it's clearer to me early on that you feel it's a contrast. So it's up to you to make that choice. It's a style choice more than anything. It's not a grammatical choice. It doesn't change the meaning.
So one more sentence I have, sir.
Okay.
However, Paul is a billionaire, but he lives in a small flat.
No, you can't do that, Anuj. Okay. Now you can with although. Although Paul is a billionaire, comma, he lives in a flat. With however, you can't put it all in the same sentence. Notice here we've got Paul is a billionaire, and then we've got a separate sentence with however. Does that make sense, Anuj?
Yes, sir.
Separate sentence for however. Now, something people see however written in the middle of sentences. Okay. Now, let's look at this. I can put however in the middle of this sentence, even in this example. But it doesn't change the order of this. Now, can you think of a way that I can add information to a sentence? How can I add some, and I'm going to give you a clue now, some related information to this sentence? Related.
Within commas.
Paul is a billionaire. He lives in a small flat. We're located in the
Okay.
center.
Well, you're close there. Which is located? Ah, okay. What's that an example of if I say which?
Relative clause.
Relative clause, related information, relative. Okay, so I could, in this case, put which shows he is humble. Okay, I can do that. Okay, it's however's in the middle here. But the thing that we really need to understand here is that it's not showing a contrast between this and this. The contrast is still here. So this is contrasting with this. I'll make that a different color. Let's make that blue, like we said yesterday. Does that make, so Han, I know you were asking me about however. I'm putting it in the middle of a sentence. Are you still there, Han?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
still here.
Okay. So can you see in this, when I look at this sentence, I don't think, I know it looks like however is in the middle, but I don't think of it as being in the middle. I think of however as being at the end of a contrast like that. That's how I see it. And then with the relative clause, I'm extending the sentence. So it's easy to look at it and think, well, that's the contrast. But it's not.
No.
I'm contrasting with what went before it. So that's a tricky one. Maybe that's something that people can experiment with and show me later. I'd like to show another way where we can use a subject. So let's talk about two different people. Let's talk about, let's say, Paul is a billionaire. That makes me feel good to say that. Okay, Paul is a billionaire. Let's say Alina. Alina is not rich. Okay, is that true, Alina?
Yes, obviously.
Okay, I'm sorry to say that. Okay, okay. So Paul is a billionaire. Alina is not rich. Now, if I
Lucky you.
wanted to, here I could say, can you tell me a sentence with however? I could say Paul is a billionaire. We'll just have that.
Yeah.
And then if we just look at these ones.
It should be related for a Paul.
Oh, no. Well, yeah.
No.
Well, if we think about it, I can just what's the contrast here? I'm a billionaire and you are not
And
rich.
I'm not, yeah.
So I can just put however. However,
His friend
Alina
Alina.
She's not.
is not rich. Okay, so that's the most basic way of doing it. Now we can do it another way. I can go like this. Sorry, full stop. Alina, however,
He's not rich.
is not rich. Now I can't do it all the time. I wouldn't say Paul is a billionaire. He, however, lives in a small flat. I wouldn't do that. I'm not saying that it's impossible. I wouldn't say he lives, however, in a small flat either. But what I can do is if I've got two people that I'm comparing, I can put the subject at the beginning. It's very common to do it. I can put the subject here, Alina, and then afterwards put however. Does that make sense, Alina?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I think however is not that complex. And it seems complex. I mean, if you look at this one, it looks complex, but that's only because I've added a relative clause. And like I always say, things which are complex are made up of simple things. A great example would be a human being. Okay, there's some noise coming through there. Just if everyone could just go on, put yourself on mute. Okay, that's better. So a human being is a great example. Okay, we are exceptionally complex, but we're made up of very simple cells. Okay, that's what sentences are like. That's what English grammar's like. Complex sentences seem really complex, but they're made up of simple bits. If we look at this, okay, if I take this sentence, let's analyze it. Can anyone tell me what we know? What does this sentence tell us? How many things do I know about Paul?
He
He is
He has been,
Same.
Paul is a billionaire.
He lives
has
in
a small flat.
Very small flat.
Yeah, he lives in a small flat.
He's humble.
He is humble, yeah. So that's what I know. Now, if I wanted to be really, really repetitive and robotic, this is how I would say it. 3 sentences. Paul is a billionaire. Paul lives in a small flat. Paul is humble. Now, that's not good writing, but the grammar is very, very accurate. It's all in the right tense. There are no problems with the vocabulary. It's absolutely fine, but it's basic. It doesn't flow. It's not smooth. It's not cohesive. So Paul is a billionaire. My first step is to say he. Straight away, it's become a little bit more cohesive because I'm not repeating Paul. Paul is a billionaire. He lives in a small flat. He is humble. Okay, now another step that I could make. Let me choose Nissan Salah. Are you there, Nissan Salah?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just give me a quick step, one thing that you can add to this that would just make it a bit more cohesive. Don't go very, very complex. Just a quick step.
We can use although.
Okay, you could use although. Even less complex than that, you could say and.
And
I could put
but.
Paul lives in a small flat and he is humble. So Paul is a billionaire. He lives in a small flat and he is humble. Well, straight away, this is starting to flow nicely. As you just said, although, okay, although Paul is a billionaire,
He lives in a small flat and he's humble.
brilliant. That's excellent. That's really, really nice. This is really already just with a few quick steps. We've added 3 ideas into one sentence. We've shown contrast and we've added an idea on. Now, if I wanted to, I can do what we said before, which shows he is humble. Relative clause. It looks really complex. It looks really complex. Or we take a step back and we did what we did before. And we say, Paul is a billionaire, full stop. He lives in a small flat, however, which shows he is humble. It's not simple to complex in one step. You learn all of the small bits of grammar and you put them together, just like cooking. Okay? You couldn't say to someone who's never cooked in their life, make me a lasagna. You can't make a lasagna if you've never cooked before in your life. You don't know what to do with the pasta. You don't know how to cook onions. You don't know how to make a tomato sauce and a bechamel. You don't know how to put it all together. You've got to learn all of the little bits first and then put them together. It seems complex, but once you know how to do it, you never forget. I'll never forget how to make a lasagna. I made a good one last night. Okay? So, however, we've had a look at some really nice examples here. All right, okay. So let's have a look at despite.
Can I have a question?
Yeah, okay, Han, absolutely
Yep.
fine.
Quick the sentence about Paul and Anna,
Oh, Alina, yeah?
Alina. So can I use with anybody or have to be to show relationship between Paul and Alina? So we
Yeah,
can compare.
yeah, that's what you're doing. You're contrasting the situation for
Yeah.
Alina and Paul. So it could be, let's do me and you, Han. Okay, so let's say Han is a great chef. Okay, Paul
Thank you.
is terrible in the kitchen. Okay, so give me however.
Okay. Paul Han is a great chef.
Mhm.
Paul, however, is terrible in kitchen.
Perfect. That's it. That's all it is, Han.
Okay.
But what do you think people will forget when they write that sentence?
They easy forget about the Paul, the subject of the sentence.
Yeah, but there's something else they'll forget.
The commas.
The commas. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we think about it, I'm not saying that this is always the case, but quite a lot of time in English, if there's a comma and then a word and then a comma, or a comma and then a bit of a sentence and a comma, it means you can remove it. Not all the time, but quite a lot. So look at that. All I did was add, however, in order to show that I want you to know that it's a contrast. I'm choosing to say it.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So
Thank you.
okay, no problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on and look at despite in the next section of the lesson. So I'm going to stop the stream. If anyone's got any questions, please do